I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and it was way past my bedtime, which was like 8 o'clock back then. My oldest brother had gathered a group of his friends in the living room, and they were playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was supposed to be asleep. Instead, I hid upstairs around the corner of the hallway, just watching and listening on these adventures unfold before my eyes. Now, the party had just entered some kind of crypt or the like, and they went to a small chamber that had 7 coffins inside. And after being in there for just a moment, all 7 coffins had opened up, revealing a vampire in each of them. The magic user of the party panicked and instantly threw a fireball into the middle of the cramped room. To his credit, he incinerated like 6 of the vampires. The downside is that he scorched every single party member that was also there with them. It was one of the funniest things I had ever seen. And that's one of the few moments that made me realize, even as a young kid, that I love D&D. And I thought it would be fun to go back and revisit the edition that I started with. This one from 1991. As you can see, this book has seen some use in his days because I played this game a lot. And I always love opening up these handbooks. I always feel like I'm opening up a tome of knowledge with all kinds of secrets at my fingertips. The Dungeons & Dragons Rules Cyclopedia wasn't an all-new edition or alternative or whatever at the time. Rather, it took about 7 rulebooks that made up D&D Basic and put them all in this one comprehensive guide, and really well. This one book had everything you needed for players, for dungeon masters, monsters, whatever. Wow, how much did this thing cost at the time? Only $24.95? And forget cost of living, D&D is suffering the most to inflation. I love the original class options. They were so simple to understand. The classes you could play as were Fighter, Cleric, Thief, Magic User, Elf, Dwarf, Halfling? What? Yeah, in D&D Basic, picking a race wasn't a thing. Everyone was a human, unless you picked the class of Dwarf, Elf, or Halfling, and they were basically alternative fighters. The first class I ever played as was Elf, because it was a fighter and a magic user. I got to hit stuff with a sword and cast magic missile once per day. The original experience point requirements were completely out of whack. Something simple like the fighter needed 2,000 experience points to level up. The magic user needed 2,500, the cleric only needed 1,500, and the thief was a paltry 1,200 experience points. Remember that elf class that I began with? To get to level 2, it needed 4,000 experience points. I don't think I ever made it to level 2. I stopped playing an elf after realizing that. Jeez, the cleric couldn't even cast a spell until level 2. What's commonly known as the group's healer couldn't even heal until level 2. So for at least one level, the cleric is just a shitty fighter. I quickly adapted Thief as my favorite class, and I still play Thief or Rogue characters in RPGs to this day. I saw their fast level up requirements and this huge table of cool skills they could use to help the party outside of combat, and I think that's the best part. I guess backstabbing is cool too. Spell lists used to be way simpler too. They only had 13 options or so at every level. These days, it's like twice that much. It's thanks to this book that I will forever know the greatness that is Magic Missile. But there were a lot of other hilarious spells too, like Sticks to Snakes. What does it do? You turn a pile of sticks into snakes. That is the funniest goddamn thing. Imagine seeing your neighbor kid picking up sticks in his front lawn, and you see him and you cast Sticks to Snakes, and he looks down in his hands and all he sees is ah! That's funny. Of course, there were also some really stupid spells, like Ventriloquism, Control Temperature, Speak with Plants, or Growth of Animal. Although, that would be a great follow-up to the Sticks to Snakes spell. The Rules Cyclopedia does such a good job of having all the rules you could possibly think of in one place. It even has rules of stuff you would never even think of. Boxing and wrestling, aerial combat, naval combat, underwater, siege weapons. Jesus, I still don't understand these tables. This is supposed to be Dungeons & Dragons Basic, and yet you still have to deal with tables like this. There are 2 pages of this. Chapter 14 is all about the monsters of D&D. All of the classics are here. Beholders, dragons, kobolds. Looking through this again, I noticed that there's a lot of monsters that they don't really use anymore. Like the Actaeon, you know, an elk centaur. Or the giant ferret. Or crabgrass. It's like normal grass, except it's all grabby. And let us never forget the deadliest and most ferocious of all creatures in D&D Basic. Yellow mold! Tremble in fear as you realize that yellow mold is not covered by your landlord's lease agreement, and you shall suffer extreme embarrassment at your next dinner party. One of the things I always appreciated about this book was how awesome the art was. I mean, the front cover alone is pretty sweet, but I always really liked the simple line and ink art that they had on the inside. So many of these images made it clear the kind of world that D&D is supposed to be. It let me know what characters are supposed to look like, what monsters look like, or how cool spells can be. Then again, not all of the art was great. For example, I'm pretty sure there's something wrong with this fighter's legs. This ogre mage is wearing a wizard robe that he bought from Party City, and these two guys seem more confused than threatened. And I'm pretty sure that this is some clip art that they forgot to take out. But so much of the art in here is excellent. I think what I like the most about it is that many of these pictures are more than just a picture representing whatever rule the page is talking about. So many of these tell a story within its image, and they can inspire ideas for your own campaign. And a few of these pictures are just silly, like this one. I remember this one pretty well, mostly because you can kind of see this guy's butt, and they're kneeing each other in the groin. And that's funny. Oh no, our heroes are completely trapped in this corner! And this archer is completely worthless. Here we can see that the dungeon master is vividly explaining his world, and this player has no idea what is going on. Man, look at how old this picture is! They're still wearing wristwatches. Don't stab me, Mr. Spearman. My God! Quickly, man the harpoon! Take aim! Look out! Seagulls! You know what would be fun? Creating an all-new character using this rule set. Let's do it! I'm going to make my favorite class, a thief, and he'll be named after my longtime go-to D&D name for all my thief characters, Death Woodrow. And I will adhere 100% strictly to these rules. Can't wait to see how this goes. Poorly, it turns out. You set your ability scores by rolling 3d6, or 3 6-sided die, and adding them together. My rolls sucked. I set my highest roll to Dexterity, the Thief Prime Requisite, which was a measly 14. My next highest roll was 13, which I assigned to Strength, so I would get even a slight bonus to my attack and damage rolls. My intelligence was 10, because Death isn't stupid, and his charisma is also 10, because I don't want people to hate him. His constitution is 7, making him more frail than most. This leaves his wisdom with a score of 6, which means even as a super sneaky thief, Death has no idea what is going on around him. His low constitution score also made his maximum hit points a whopping 3, which was the best possible amount I could have gotten. This gives him about a 40% chance or so of surviving a single attack from a kobold. I also only started with 70 gold pieces off of a 3d6 times 10 roll, which means after buying what I consider standard starting equipment, I was left with a single silver piece left over. I couldn't even afford a ration. You know what? Let's send Death into battle. He'll fight a creature from the random dungeon encounters level 1 table. Alright, I rolled a 19, so that's a troglodyte. For fairness, we'll say that there's only one troglodyte, and Death has miraculously sneaked up on him, having succeeded his move silently check of 20% and hide in shadows of 10%. Like I said, miraculous. The troglodyte has an armor class of 5, and according to Death's 2-hit armor class 0, or Thaco, he needs a roll of at least 14 to hit. Thanks to his stealth, he can backstab, which gives him a +4 to hit for double damage. Death stabs with his short sword and 14 plus 1 from strength and +4 for backstab, a total of 19. His backstab pierces the rough scales of the troglodyte, dealing a total of 7 points of damage. The troglodyte began with 12 hit points, bringing it down to 5. Still standing, it turns around and attacks Death with both of its claws and a bite. First claw hits, next claw hits, bite hits. Death takes a total of 10 points of damage, and he is very dead. Well, that sounds about right. The rules for Dungeons & Dragons were much harsher back then, but I also think that can make for more interesting characters. I kind of missed the whole 3d6 for your ability scores and you're stuck with it approach when it came to creating new heroes. And even though it is more complicated, part of me misses Thaco. I will always hold a really big place in my heart for D&D Basic, and I will never get rid of this beat up, ragged old book for the rest of my life. It's because of this book that I have such a long and fond history of Dungeons and Dragons. Man, could you imagine if Dieth actually killed that troglodyte though? He only needs 1,200 experience points to level up. Do you know how many experience points he would have gotten if he had actually killed it? Only 25? Thank you for watching the first ever D&December video. If you want to watch more videos, I recommend the one I did on Magic the Gathering. Or for something completely different, I highly recommend Youngtown's Legend of Zelda rap. Thank you for watching.